Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajat Lee for the Left Hook Substack, where I invite a subject matter expert who is far smarter than me to break down one big question in 30 minutes or less. And I'm so happy that I have an expert to finally talk about the MAGA manosphere. I've been talking about this for such a long time. MAGA's weaponization of toxic masculinity, the performance of masculinity to appeal to young men. And sadly, folks, it works like gangbusters. And today, we have a person who's been researching this for years. I have Elise Hogue. She's the president of Catalyst for American Futures and a veteran movement strategist who has been researching and writing about the MAGA manosphere. And specifically, what I want to ask her is how MAGA, in particular, is branding authoritarianism to appeal to young men. Elise, thank you for joining us and thank you for being a masochist and swimming in the waters of toxic bros who are really heterosexual. Uh, we just to give an example of this, as we are recording this, this is a Friday. This is going to come out over the weekend. Economy not doing so well. Trump caved on his trade war, but he has 145% tariffs on China. Uh, Price of everything's going up. Record price of eggs in March. S&P's down. Dow Jones is down. Japan and China selling off U.S. bonds. But we are told by right-wing media this is a masculine trade war, and this was a manly move. Break it down, just starting it from this week's example, Elise.
Yeah, one of the things that I tell people is you look at a segment on Fox News like Jesse Waters this week, who went after Trump's manly tariffs and said things like, being behind a screen makes you a woman. And if you just get back on the factory floor building robots with Harold, you are going to feel strong. You are going to feel like the man that you were designed to be. And, I think those of us who are on the left or, Democrats definitely, they sort of laugh that off as though the ridiculousness of it is obvious at face value. And let's be clear, the hosts are kind of laughing too, right? Like they're in on the joke, but they're strumming some pretty deep emotional chords there,
Yep.
right? And that's what they know that we don't get. That for over a decade now, we've been seeing a resurgence of this feeling that men are not allowed to be men, that they can't have the kinds of lives that their fathers and grandfathers had. And we've got this sort of toxic combination of culture and policy that makes them very vulnerable to the grievance politics of the right. And the Bannons of the world know that, and they have invested heavily in a growing and vibrant ecosystem of men online who actually, by the way, don't really talk that much politics at first, right? They're telling you how to work out, how to get buff, how to get chicks, how to do the games better, how to game, how to get rich quick with crypto. We
Mm.
know where they're coming from, but after not too long, these guys are hearing who's to blame for the fact that they can't get ahead in life. And it's pretty seductive. And so when you hear something like the manly tariffs, you've got a couple of different things going on. You've got this sort of tapping into, it's not even nostalgia because a lot of these young men don't remember a day where it was normal to work on the factory floor, but they do remember stories of their grandfather. I just heard a guy in Detroit say, my grandfather worked for the trash company in the city and could afford a house and raise five kids.
Yep.
Like, I have an office job and I can't do that. Right. So he's got this role model of his grandfather who was doing work with his hands and could afford all the things he can't afford. So you've got that sort of yearning to have that security and family and be a provider. And at the same time, you really have a no pain, no gain ethos at play there, which is like Trump primed that pump starting from the not State of the Union, the joint, address to Congress, where he was like, this is going to hurt a little bit, but like that's where the tough will thrive. And so it really has
Don't be a panican.
yeah, exactly, right. And so it has hit a bunch of these guys where they want a strong leader and they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And if there's some temporary pain to get there, they're all for it.
And I really appreciate you talking about this YouTube fascination. I've been on I'm trying to warn some folks because I've seen how, politics is downstream from culture. And, leading going up to the election, I'm like, y'all aren't paying attention to the fact that they're using comedians, these white bro comedians who like, are politically incorrect and drink beer and just joke, and how many of these folks and these pranksters, in addition to UFC, is basically a free ad for MAGA and Trump. Can you talk to us about the use of culture, and specifically, let's start with UFC and that how that has been so integral to the MAGA movement? And if people think I'm joking, Dana White was at the inauguration. So
Yeah.
was Joe Rogan. Dana White on election night was invited by Donald Trump to address the audience, and Dana White, the founder and creator of UFC, gave a shout out to Theo Vaughn and the Nelk Boys and Joe Rogan, who are YouTubers, from the stage for helping Trump win.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, there were a handful of us, I think you were among them, sort of screaming into the void in 2024 that this was a cliff we were about to walk over. And, young men writ large went 14 points went right 14 points from 2020. And, I always feel compelled to tell people this. It's not just the white boys.
Yep.
We are seeing this across race, across ethnicity, and they're coming in. We did a user journey study 2 years ago, and it's like the algorithm, if you log on to say, how can I get fitter, right? Like a lot of young men want to be fit. It only takes you 3 or 4 turns before you get into something called red pill fitness, which
Mm.
still is not hawking for candidates, right? But it is starting to form a worldview for you about why you're doing all this self-improvement stuff and maybe you still can't get laid. Or you're buff as hell, but you can't get a job that pays you well. Whereas, like a while ago, that would have been a no-brainer. But I think you're right that it is uh, prescient of them, and it has been very intentional to go where the culture is, right? And you see that with the fighting, you see that with the gambling.
Yep.
Dave Portnoy at Barstool Sports is like a big guy in this world.
And now he's crying because he lost $7 million
He
overnight.
is. He was pretty sad about that. Um, but he'll come. I feel certain Dave will come back
Yes,
from
he'll come back.
it. And you see it in a lot of these smaller channels where you wouldn't even know these guys' names, but they are out there. And in addition to gaming, crypto, and fitness, one of the ones that really popped as a way that influencers are sort of coaxing these young men down the extremist path was DIY, right? Like, I just want to fix my carburetor. I just want to save the money from going to a mechanic, work with my hands and fix my carburetor. And that turns out to be an entry point on YouTube to more radical ideas. But I think the point that you're making is really important, which is the right was observing this. They were like, oh, these guys are out there. We can resource them. We can network them. We can make them feel pretty special. And this started years ago. This did not happen like Democrats do in the last mile of the campaign. Oh, we're going to have a convention. Let's invite some influencers. Not that that is a terrible thing to do, but if you haven't seeded the culture way upstream, it's not going to have the impact that you want it to have. And it's getting crazy out there. I mean, we were talking before we got on the air about some of these crazy fads that are just really leaning into this like hyper masculine, the strong will survive. And it sort of started with Tucker Carlson's testicle tanning. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And a PSA to your audience: do not Google Tucker Carlson testicle tanning because
Now
you
everyone is
cannot.
going to Google Tucker Carlson testicle tanning.
You
This is the way.
cannot unsee that stuff once you have seen it. But this real idea that liberals were out there to rob you of your masculinity, and
Yeah.
we have to go to extreme lengths. And now one of the fitness fads is to work out while smoking cigarettes because
Genius.
that boosts your testosterone. So there seems to be no end in sight to this.
It's no end to sight, and I appreciate you connecting the dots because Steve Bannon understands culture. He spent time in Hollywood. He spent time in the gaming industry. People forget that he made a lot of money that way. Andrew Breitbart, his mentor, who was also mentored by Ariana Huffington, that's the way the world works, folks, said politics is downstream from culture. So they've groomed these individuals, right? And they take these schlubs, these kind of B-lister comedians, these white bros, if you notice, right? They give them some lift. They groom people like Joe Rogan, give them some lift, right? And then these folks realize, whoa, if I mix in some right-wing politics with my fitness talk or my UFC talk, my sports talk, my comedy, my base grows and I get invited on Fox and the right wing, and there's money here, right? And voila, they capture and convert an entire demographic that's available to them. In addition to that demographic, you're also now talking about this toxic masculinity that comes in vis-a-vis like the Andrew Tates, right? And it reminds me, I don't know if you know this reference. We used to watch this movie, Magnolia, came out 25 years ago, directed by Thomas Anderson. There's a character in there played by Tom Cruise, who's clearly a con man teaching men, right? Respect, pardon my language. He goes, respect the cock. And all these incels are paying him money and how to like dominate women and like, you have to take the woman. She'll never respect you. You have to be a man. And they're like, yeah. And then Andrew Tate comes along. Explain to us this aspect of the loathing of women, the misogyny that then gets caked in with the alpha male performance, which is so critical to understanding MAGA's worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's this is almost a tale as old as time, right? Like I have a kid, I have a husband, I have a brother. When you're a certain age, you want to know how to pick up women, right? Like it's just if you are straight, and there are lots of guys that don't fit that, but like there is a
Most dudes,
cultural,
let's just be honest,
yeah,
most dudes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm from the left, so I have to do all the
Yeah,
caveats,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so but most dudes at some point are like, I want to pick up women. Women are scary, they mature sooner, and so you've always had things like the pickup artist and Tucker Max. I think where it's really taken a turn is Trump's initial run gave the social permission to say, if you can't pick them up, honestly, A, there's something wrong with them. It ain't you, buddy, right? It's them. And B, you take what you want,
Mm,
right? And that really kind of put steroids into the system of these misogynistic bros who decided it was now culturally acceptable to dominate women. And we saw that grow during Trump's first term as soon as it was not a disqualifier. The Hollywood access tape that he said grab him by the pussy was
yeah.
not a disqualifier. That was like a green light to all these guys. And a lot of these guys online came out of Gamergate. I don't know if your
Yeah,
viewers
I
know what
remember. Can
Gamergate
you
is, but
quickly tell people about Gamergate?
yeah. So Gamergate was a pretty famous online bullying where a swarm of game developers, hypermasculine game developers, who saw gaming as really the purview of men, ganged up on a group of women game developers who were putting female protagonists in the games. And it started off as just like swarming them online. It got real serious real fast. People had to move out of their homes. There were bomb threats to speeches. Well, a lot of those guys formed the what I called the third stool of Trump's first run. One stool was the religious right, who happily traded any of their morals for the Supreme Court seats that he got them. The second stool was the white supremacist. David Duke came out of the ooze slime bed that he had been sleeping in and said, hey, this is my guy. But the third stool in 2016 was not that noticeable to the traditional political establishment because they weren't politically organized before Trump. And a lot of them came out of Gamergate, and they were self-described men's rights advocates. They were like, culture has gone too far. Feminism is out of control. We need to stand up for men, and we need to do it by force, right? And they were really significant in politically organizing for Trump and putting him first over the edge in the primary. That was a crowded primary in 2016, if you remember.
Yeah.
And then again in the general. And they continued to grow and thrive and spawn kind of a new generation. And as they were spawning a new generation, even more radical ideas, characters, figures like Andrew Tate got normalized. And at the same time, you had this influx of resources and dollars into this ecosystem. Oh, you have an online audience. I bet you wish someone would have said this to you a long time ago, right? Let me pay you so you can do this full time and say incendiary things and get more of an audience. And then they spawn more platforms, and, Rumble came online. And by the
Yep.
way, it is important to point out, my friend is Sosa Osa, who runs Onyx Impact, says this all the time. When Rumble came online, it was part of their business plan to hire Black cultural figures to seed that platform, right? And we started to see that in this election cycle, where at first it was white men who we were losing to the authoritarian right. Now, as we are really living in a young generation that is honestly pretty multicultural. I mean, the Proud Boys say that they are a really diverse group all the time, and they are.
Enrique
Correct.
Tario is the
Correct.
leader.
So, as Gen Z started to dominate culture, they really had internalized that they live in a multiracial America, and misogyny became the animating feature of the alt-right, that whereas white supremacy had been for their
Yeah, you
grandfathers.
want to make American men feel great again.
Yeah.
American men feel left behind. They're making less money than their fathers. Less of them are going to college. Many of them have only seen, like they haven't seen economic prosperity, right? And then they are told the left hates men and hates heterosexual men, and by their very nature, you are our patriarchal beast and a demon, right? And then they do the divide and conquer. We're going to help women and LGBTQ, and then it's the old, Southern strategy now applied to gender and sexuality. They're gaining and you're losing, and this is where I feel like, how did liberals mess up? Because liberals messed up, and you can't, you said something I really appreciated because you caught yourself. He goes, "Oh, I'm a liberal, so I have to, oh my God, Elise, because people did this. I told liberals, you have to respect men also." And then some liberals told me, no, men have to stay quiet. Men have to take a back seat. The heterosexual men are part of the problem, and they need to. And I'm like, listen, I get it. Trust me, my species has committed many sins. We need to do better, but you cannot just abandon 47% of the population, 45% of the population, right? And you've heard this, Elise. I've heard this leading up to the 2024 election. In my communities, I can tell you so many men who voted Democrat but holding their nose said a form of, yeah, man, the left doesn't care about men. Yeah, man. I'll even go take it a step further. And even though I don't agree with this, yeah, the left is like really gay, like in literally gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the left is like really just into women. And unfortunately, the way that works is, and the way that's played on by the right wing, as you've described over the past 20 minutes, oh, there's no place for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really, look, I am big into self-reflection. I ran an abortion rights organization for 8 years. I firmly do not believe that social progress of one class has to come at the
I
expense
agree.
of others. But I have to say, we did not always act that way, right? And there was a collective, I've written about this, there was a collective shock that someone like Donald Trump could win the election as a serial predator and rapist. And there was a backlash to that I think was normal and okay and needed to be checked at some point, and it wasn't. And I say all the time, I got attacked so much online for leading an abortion rights organization. I get more attacked online from the left when I talk about needing to be inclusive of young men
Yeah.
than I ever did from the right for my abortion advocacy. And I'll give you a really good example. 24 hours after Donald Trump won, neo-Nazi scumbag Nick Fuentes started an online chant, "Your body, my choice."
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I like you. I am unfortunately a
Mhm.
masochist and know the right-wing threads and memes way too much.
Yeah.
Yes.
So another Trump supporter, hyper-masculine, sort of, quasi fighter, Jake Paul, immediately smacked Nick Fuentes down and was like, dude, that is not why I voted for the guy. That is not my value. That is not my virtue. So shut up. And I lifted that up. I was like, this is what we need. We need another guy saying to this
Smart. That's
guy,
smart politics also.
I mean, the amount of hate I got from my people for suggesting that Jake Paul could have any redeeming quality was staggering, right? And look, I will tell you, I spend so much time in particular Discord channels that they call me Cougar Den Mom. But um, this is not a generation of men that was born into extremism. They actually care about progressive policies. They want poverty alleviation. They want good education. They want good housing policy. They just want a future where they can be a part of it. And they feel like they have been told time and time again. And I want to break this down because I think it's important. You don't get to participate in your own destiny.
Mm.
Your dad or your granddad or somewhere down the line, some guy in your family did something wrong. Therefore, we get to shape your destiny for you. And I cannot imagine another group of people that would ever accept that, nor should we expect them to, right? But we have the cultural effect, right? Like many times over Trump's first term, we saw men are trash as, trending as though like just by virtue of being born a man, like you could have no redeeming value. So there's the cultural piece. There's the actual political piece, which is like the Democrats didn't talk to men as an interest group, like Scott Gall.
Mind-boggling.
I mean, like there was a 16-page brochure put out on the jobs and infrastructure, the benefits of the job and infrastructure bill. No men in it, right? All these women in hard
It's
hats. Look,
remarkable.
I love
Remarkable.
that. I love women in hard hats, but I've never seen a job site where you only have women in hard hats. Um, and then even this week, one of the things that I really think that the Democrats aren't getting is Trump did an about face on the tariffs. He faced an enormous amount of backlash from his own side. He did the impossible and unified a fractured MAGA coalition. Everybody hated the tariffs. The Democrats were pretty in lockstep on the tariffs. And the Democrats kept saying, you know what? They're a tax. Great. They're a tax. Whatever. They are bad for the American people. Sure, of course, they're bad for the American people. What the Democrats did not say is that guy, that strong guy that you elected president, he just blinked. He's not as strong as you think he is.
Caved. He's
He
weak.
caved. He is weak. He is like that schoolyard bully that when you throw the punch, he goes down. And that is the posture we need to affect. Honestly, not just for young men, but because I wrote a piece called Weak, Not Woke. Because if you really look at the numbers, I am the first one to say that like lefty excesses means that regular people don't understand us and we need to get a check on that. But if you look at the numbers, voters thought Trump was more beholden to his extreme base than Harris was to hers, but they thought he could get shit done.
Yeah.
And they think Democrats are weak. And like, if nothing's working, who are you going to go with? The guy that can get stuff done or the party that has a lot of excuses for why they can't?
And this makes me feel somewhat better because it reaffirms what I've been doing, and I'm not screaming in the void. I keep saying, if you hear me in tweet, I say he's weak. They're weak. They're insecure. They're fragile. They're performing. He caved. He swerved. He played chicken. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's an
Yeah.
idiot, right? Because first of all, I believe it, but second of all, if you puncture the protective cocoon of this narrative that he's created, then the world sees The emperor has no
Right,
clothes.
exactly.
Oh, he is a moron. He is weak. He is vain. He is fickle. And then you need a robust counter narrative. Ah, this person compared to that person is competent and strong and decisive. And instead, we get Democrats who are like,
Right,
go,
exactly.
let me go research this and overpay consultants who will lead me the wrong path. They don't talk like normal people, which it kills me. At least it kills me. And I do think it's one of those things that my co-host on Democracy is Danielle, and Danielle is very progressive. Even a little bit more progressive than me. But she agreed with me. She's a Black queer woman. We had this conversation just impromptu on our live show a few months ago, and we said mistake on the left, like talking down to people, excising men, not talking to young men, and voila, look what happened. So the question I have for you, the final question is two quick questions, if you don't mind. I look at what's happening in the right wing, and having been 44 years old now and lived this thing called life, I know that narrative is not sustainable. I'm married, I got kids. I know what happens. 5 years down the line, they're going to be in shitty relationships. Uh, they're going to hate themselves. They're not going to be fulfilled. Their kids will probably hate them. And it'll be too late before they realize they got played. It's going to implode. Like Jerry Springer. There's only so much of a freak show America tolerates before it implodes. But your prediction, what's going to happen on the right if we keep descending down this toxic, fake, performative alpha man stereotype, which is all BS, by the way. We all know they're all insecure. But your prediction about where this is going?
I mean, I think it could go in one of three directions. We are starting to see an effect on some elements of young female culture, rise in trad wife, propaganda online, and a rise in college applications in the South where gender norms are sort of, taking us back to the 50s and 60s. I don't really love that view. I believe in social progress. I think we can get there. I think there's another way that this goes in that we just completely abandon the playing field. We're already dealing with a generation of young people writ large, by the way, not just young men, who are pretty nihilistic, have grown up with multiple compounding existential threats. And that doesn't go anywhere pretty.
Nope.
That goes into civil war and the kind of social destabilization that I don't think anyone really wants to see. My favorite way that this could go is that progressive funders and the progressive ecosystem and Democrats could get wise and say, A, we're better than this. We are the people that believe that we know how to build social and economic policy that is inclusive of everyone. We are the people that believe in universal freedom, rights, and opportunities. And here's the kicker: they have outspent us 100 to 1
Mm.
on these cultural ecosystems to win by that much. Right. So it's not even like we have to spend that is an indication that they have to work so hard to pull these people over that if we would even just show up on the playing field, we would do better than we are now. So that's where I spend my time. And, just trying to say, let's get in the game because I spend a lot of time with these guys. They just want to be asked to play. You know what I mean? They're with us on a lot of this stuff. They
And
want to
and
be asked to play.
and you made a really good point. They spent so much money. They've engaged in voter suppression. They've engaged in intimidation, in violence, in a violent insurrection, only to win by 1.4 percentage points, only to barely take the House and barely take the Senate. But what you're also saying is people, especially men, want to see fighters fighting for them.
Mm.
They want to see fighters, a fighting spirit. And in the absence of a fighting spirit, human nature, Elise, I always tell people is even I watch sports, even if my team loses, you know, if they fight to the end and they lose by one score, I say, you know what? They competed. Respect. But if you're milk toast and appear weak, who does that inspire, Elise?
I know.
Nobody. Nobody. So we have smart fighters like you who've done the work. I appreciate you being a masochist and swimming in these toxic waters. They're extremely toxic for anybody, especially for a woman. So you are tough. And I also want to reiterate something that's very important. Our success, our mutual success in our communities is not mutually exclusive. It's not, us versus them. It's not zero sum. It's all of us. And there is a way to raise women and the marginalized and LGBTQ and young men. That's the type of vision. It's all of us have to be raised. Otherwise, as we've clearly seen, folks, it doesn't work. Elise, thank you so much for your time. Shamelessly promote yourself, please. How can people support you? How can people find you?
Wonderful. Yeah, I run something called the Catalyst for American Futures, AmericanFutures.com. And a project of that is the Speaking with American Men project. And we're going to have more to come on that. But it's been a pleasure to be on here. I appreciate everything you do. And let's talk again sometime.
We will talk soon. I'm going to have you on another show. Elise Hogue, everyone, fighting the good fight. And everybody, please, if you can, subscribe to The Left Hook. It's free. I'm a terrible capitalist. No paywalls. I'm like Blanche Dubois. I depend on the kindness of strangers. It's all reader supported. It's theleft.substack.com. And everyone, please be kind. Take care of yourselves. And please, oh, please, don't be a fascist. Take care.